Welcome back, AP World History, to another video. Mr. Sandoval here, and today I'm going to be talking about post-classical Europe. And so, in this post-classical period, roughly 600 CE to 1450 CE. Whoa, too far, Mr. Sandoval. Hey, some of the things we're going to be talking about. Okay, so kind of painting the picture. Right, by 600, Christianity and Buddhism have spread, far and wide. Islam is just getting ready to make its appearance into history. During this time period, right, the Mongol Empire is going to be prevalent, medieval Europe, early African civilization, medieval Japan, the Byzantine Empire, the Aztecs and the Inca, right? All these different civilizations are occurring in this time period. And by 1450, classical trade routes are going to have intensified, right? Gotten better. Islam is going to now be spread across Afro-Eurasia. The Mongol Empire is going to have been broken up. The Americas are still going to be isolated from Afro-Eurasia, and interactions, right, with languages, religion, the workforce, etc., are going to be increasing. Okay, so some geography for post-classical Europe, right? We have obviously some Viking ships. We're going to have the Hanseatic League spread across Europe, which we're going to talk about. Right? A bunch of Italian city-states. The majority of Spain is going to be under the religion of Islam, right? And then you're going to have basically the French and England empires. Okay, so feudalism is a huge concept in post-classical Europe, and it is, right, kind of this relationship between these three estates or classes. So the clergy, the nobility, and peasants. And so to understand feudalism, you have to know the verbiage that is used, okay, and then we'll get to how it works. Okay, so at the top, you have the king. Okay, below the king, you have lords who are loyal to the king. Right under that, you have knights who help protect the lords and fight for the lords. And below them, you have everybody else, the peasants or the serfs, and they're responsible for farming, making food, right, producing goods. Right, they do all the manual labor. The knights, protect everybody. The lords are the ones that own the land and pay the knights for protection and all these things. And then the king, of course, right, rules over everybody. So right, and that's kind of broken down into how it all works, right? So the lords, they're the nobility with the land. They give, these knights, contracts to protect them, right? And they protect them, and then the peasants, do all the manual labor and provide for everyone. Okay, so another kind of broken down image of feudalism, right? So I didn't mention the church in the last slide. So the church is somewhat of its own entity, right? And it's up there or even above the monarch, right? So the church in medieval Europe has a huge uh, power in making decisions related to religion and also just related to politics and decisions for the country. And then it's, maybe a little bit neater break down the monarchs, the nobles, the knights, then the merchants, farmers, craftsmen, and at the very bottom, peasants and serfs. But in the term of, that third class, right, merchants, farmers, craftsmen, peasants, serfs, they're all kind of in that bottom. Okay, so interaction with the environment, right, would be this open field system. So different manors, right, and when we say manor, we're talking about these estates that, have these huge plots of land that, people live on. If you look here, right, the manor house, in the center, and then all surrounded by the manor house is all these different fields for farming. Okay, so each manor had anywhere from 2 to 3 fields, and these fields are massive, right? They're hundreds of acres. When you think of an acre, that's roughly the size of a football field. So, hundreds of acres are hundreds of football fields. And all of these are divided into single strips. and a single strip was the responsibility of a single peasant or serf, right? So like, hey, you're assigned to this strip, you work this strip, hey, and so therefore, kind of the whole village and manor, needed to work together to understand, who's responsible for what strip of land, what's being grown on these different strips of land, and that kind of thing. Hey, and later, this system is going to be figured out to be not as efficient as if you just chunk, these whole fields into one thing and enclose them and, provide one task to a giant field, and have multiple people work that one field. Okay, so this system is going to get replaced eventually, right? And various innovations that are going to occur that are going to improve agriculture as a whole is the horse collar, right? And so as you can see, that is something, right? Collar, the horse is going to be able to, wear this and pull some heavy tool. The heavy plow, right, is going to be much better for dividing up the fields and helping plant seeds and things. Okay, the horseshoe is going to help these horses walk on various terrains a little easier, right, in mud and things. So it's going to provide more stability for horses. And then the wheelbarrow, and that's going to obviously provide dirt, soil, goods, right, different things to be transported much quicker. And so all of these innovations will eventually lead to population increase because, of course, the easier farming is, the more you could farm, then the more people you could feed, and the more people you could feed, the more people you can have, and thus population increases. Okay, so some different styles in architecture that are going to come about in post-classical Europe, right? So we have the Romanesque, and then we're going to kind of get this shift to this Gothic style. So Romanesque is defined by kind of these things you see here on the screen, right? There's very poor lighting. There are these massive walls that make up these castles and buildings, and there are these itty bitty windows, right? And so, really poor lighting, massive walls, small windows. Okay, then there's Gothic, right? And this is what the Gothic style looks like. There's all these points, right, in these arches. There's stained glass everywhere, right? And so, the style is drastically different, right? Solid walls, very little windows, and then boom, right? These pointed arches and all this stained glass window. So now we're gonna take a minute to figure out some differences, right? So looking at number one, we think this one's Gothic or Romanesque. Perfect, it's Romanesque, right? We see these rounded windows, we see these big walls, right? Romanesque. Number two, Gothic or Romanesque? Right again, Romanesque, right? Again, these massive walls, these tiny windows, right? Rounded windows. Okay, number three, Gothic or Romanesque? And you are 3 for 3. We are Gothic, right? So we got these pointed arches, all this stained glass, right? Number four, Gothic or Romanesque? Right again, Romanesque, right? Big walls, tiny windows. Hey, Gothic or Romanesque? Bang, right again. Hey, we got some Gothic style going on here again, right? Drastically different looking building, these stained glass windows. Okay, 6, don't even have to say it, you got it. Romanesque, right? Again, big walls, tiny windows, a very little light. Okay, and then lastly, we got yet again a Gothic style building, right, with all this stained glass, right, everywhere. Okay, and again, 8. Yep, Gothic again, right? Stained glass, right? So the difference are pretty evident, right? And so when it comes to analyzing images, pictures, and things, right, you should be able to kind of figure out the different styles of this architecture. Okay, so universities, right, are going to take root in Europe. Okay, and so the modern university as we know them today are going to originate in Europe. Okay, and basically, right, they're going to get their start. Schedules are going to be set, right, and people are going to begin attending university where they're going to study things like math, music, logic, astronomy, right, kind of these set core foundational concepts. Okay, the Hanseatic League is going to develop during this post-classical time, and this is basically a kind of like a trade union, okay, and they're going to kind of monopolize trade to some extent. They're going to develop all these trading hubs in various cities throughout Northern Europe or throughout Europe, and right, they're basically going to decide, right, that they're going to trade with each other, right, and that's going to help kind of make their goods the priority goods for trade and different things. So it's this trade federation. Right, it begins in 1368, so kind of mid to late 1300s is when it gets going, right? And at its peak, it's going to have over 60 different kind of members scattered across Europe. Okay, then the Magna Carta. Right? Magna Carta is going to be signed in 1215, and what this does, right? It's going to be a document in England. Okay, so it is going to be a first attempt of people to limit the power of kings and monarchs. Okay, so as kings are rising in power in Europe, right, the church is going to kind of take some of that power away from the king, right, and the church is going to be pretty powerful. The nobility, right, is going to an extent, challenge the king's power because they are the ones who have the militaries, right, the knights and things fighting for them. Okay, and so in 1215, King John is going to sign this Magna Carta that lists kind of some basic rights and freedoms for people. Although it's not really going to be followed entirely, it is kind of that first major foundational step to go like powers being taken away from a king kind of thing. And it will eventually kind of lead to things like in England, Parliament, as well as the Estates General in France. Okay, so the Great Schism is going to be a major divide in the church, okay, which is going to take place in about 1054. And it's basically the Catholic Church is going to split in two, and you're going to have the Orthodox Church in Eastern Europe and the Catholic Church in Western Europe. Right? And some of the things right, they're gonna they're gonna be structured a little bit differently, and they're gonna have some disagreements on different types of beliefs. Okay, so the Crusades will also take place during this time period, right? And in short, the Crusades are basically holy wars, right, sanctioned by the Pope and the Church in Europe to try and reconquer and reclaim lands such as Jerusalem from right Islamic rulers and from other peoples, and so they're basically right these wars that are there's gonna be several different crusades, right? They're gonna be met with some success and some failure. Okay, and so right here we go. They're gonna start in about 1096, okay, and they're gonna go into the late 1200s, and they're basically gonna be a mixture of successful invasions and failures to retake Jerusalem and different parts in the Middle East. Okay, then the Black Death, major events that will happen in the 1300s. Okay, and so the Black Death is going to affect people all over Eurasia, but it's going to hit really hard in Europe, and it's going to kill anywhere estimates from a third of Europe's population all the way up to as much as a half of Europe's population. Right? And there's going to be very little known at the time about this Black Death. Right? What is it? How do we cure it? Why is it happening? Right? And so, people are going to come up with all these different reasons to potentially, explain why this is happening and what it is. And so, what it actually was, a flea kind of that traveled around on rats and things, and then spreading to humans, and then humans getting infected, right? And getting sick. And then once people got sick, then, it spread, it was very contagious and spread rapidly, and there was kind of no known reason as to how to prevent or stop this Black Death, right, which is also known as the bubonic plague. Okay, so the 100 Years' War will take place in the 1300s to the 1400s as well, and it's really a chunk of a few separate conflicts and wars that gets titled this 100 Years' War, and it kind of revolves around the idea that English nobles and kings held land in part of northern France. Then when the French king dies, the English king is going to claim kind of the right to rule over France, and then they're going to fight about it. And there's going to be this fight over who should control these lands, and and run France and that kind of thing. And that's more or less the idea behind this 100 Years' War. Okay, and the last thing we're going to talk about today is something called the Little Ice Age, which is going to take a span over a few different centuries, roughly 1350 to 1850, okay, and it's going to start, towards the end of this post-classical period, okay, and the big idea as to why this, global cooling pattern matters is because it's going to cause some drastic effects, such as a famine and poor harvests, and then due to these poor harvests, people aren't going to be able to pay their taxes, and then because people can't pay their taxes, governments are going to increase taxes to try and get more money, even though people aren't paying them. And so some causes to this little ice age is going to be, fewer people as these diseases, the bubonic plague is taking people out left and right. Different volcanic activity and solar activity that's going to cause just a natural shift in the environment. And that, again, is going to have a pretty big effect on, events to come. And again, this would be another great interaction with the environment and how the environment affects, different things such as famine and things of that nature. And so lastly, right, this PowerPoint is all thanks to freemanpedia.com. So I personally did not make this, and I'll use ones in the future from freemanpedia.com because they're absolutely phenomenal and filled with great information. And I will do my best to kind of summarize, the core ideas in those PowerPoint slides. So again, thanks for watching, and hopefully you learned something.